Whose shoes are those? That was the only sentence I could manage, standing barefoot in the hallway, staring at the black leather loafers by the door. They weren't mine. I don't own anything that polished. I don't even polish mine. And they definitely weren't my brother's. He hasn't visited in years. Danica froze. She was halfway through setting the dining table, wine glasses already out, napkins folded like a restaurant. The look on her face wasn't fear, exactly. It was calculation. Like she was trying to reverse engineer what I'd seen, what I hadn't, and how much truth she needed to sprinkle in to keep me still. They're Emerson's, she finally said, not meeting my eyes. He needed a ride. His car, something about the radiator. He's in the guest room making a call. I just stood there. Not angry. Not shouting. My fingers were twitching slightly, though, like they wanted to grip onto something that wasn't there. I heard a muffled voice behind the guest room door, low and relaxed. Too relaxed. Like he lived here. Like this wasn't his first time. I thought you said he was in New York this week, I said, quieter now. More to myself than her. She blinked. That was the plan. Flights changed. I don't know what part broke me more, the clumsy lie or the fact that she expected me to swallow it whole, like I had so many others. I looked at the table again. 2 plates. 2 glasses. Her dress. Low cut. Something she hadn't worn for me in years. Music playing on her phone. Some jazz cover of a pop song I didn't recognize. Were you going to tell me I wasn't invited? I asked. Still no answer. There's a specific kind of silence that comes when someone thinks they've already won. She didn't look scared. She looked inconvenienced. Like I'd walked in on a surprise party she was throwing for someone else. I stepped toward the door. Not rushing. Just moving. And she didn't stop me. Didn't grab my arm. Didn't even say my name. Inside the guest room, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through something on his phone. Shirt off. Just sitting there, like this was some weekend retreat and not our home. My home. He looked up and said, "Oh, hey. Sorry, didn't know you were back. Not sorry I'm half naked in your house. Not sorry I'm eating with your wife. Just sorry you came home before dessert." I nodded. That's all I did. Nodded like an idiot. Then walked back out and sat on the couch. She followed me 5 minutes later. No apology. No explanation. Just sat beside me like the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. Like maybe if we both pretended hard enough, the entire night would erase itself. I didn't plan for this, she said quietly. I almost laughed. Because that was the only true thing she'd said all week. We sat there in that living room for what felt like an entire season. Her scrolling on her phone like she was waiting for an Uber, and me, just trying to process how the air between us got so thin. I didn't speak. Not because I was silent out of strength or pride. I stayed quiet because I genuinely didn't know what part of me she'd already stepped over. Something was broken, and I think the worst part was realizing she'd already swept the pieces under the rug and moved on. The man, Emerson, didn't come out of the guest room again that night. At least not while I was still sitting there. I imagine he waited until I went to bed, or maybe until I left. I honestly don't know. I eventually just stood up, walked past her, and went out to the car like a ghost wearing my own clothes. I didn't even drive anywhere. I just sat in the car, parked 3 houses down, staring through the windshield like it could explain something to me. There were houses across the street with lights off, couples probably already asleep, lives tucked neatly into routines that hadn't collapsed. I wanted that. I wanted normal. I wanted boring. But instead, I had the jazz music still echoing in my ears and the taste of shame stuck in my throat. When I finally went back inside, the table had been cleared. The wine glasses were in the sink. She was on the couch with a blanket over her legs and the TV flashing something forgettable. She didn't even look up. "You're not going to talk about it?" I asked, my voice barely louder than the TV. She shrugged without looking away. "I don't know what you want me to say, Lowell." Lowell. My name in her mouth sounded clinical. Distant. Like she was checking a patient chart. "I want you to explain how you invited him here," I said. "How you dressed up, lit candles, poured wine, while telling me you were working late. I want you to admit that it wasn't just some emergency car ride or innocent drop-in." That got her to finally glance my way. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under at work," she said slowly, carefully. "He's not just my boss. He's the reason I'm still employed. He's important to the company, and if I said no..." "Then what?" I cut in, the bitterness finally leaking through. "He'd fire you unless you fed him pasta in our dining room and let him walk around shirtless in my house?" She sat up straighter, her face tight. "It's not like that. You're twisting this. You always twist things." "Always?" "I don't even argue. That's the thing. I let her do whatever she wants. I wait up for her. I support every decision she makes. When her old car broke down, I gave up my savings for her down payment. When her sister needed help moving, I canceled my trip to help them both. I've been twisting myself into knots trying to keep her from drifting, and now she tells me I'm the one who distorts everything? She finally says it quietly, but clearly. I just needed a moment to feel like I was someone else. That's all. Someone exciting. Not the woman who comes home to the same pajamas and routine. It's not about you, Lowell. It's about me. That hit harder than anything else. Not because she cheated, but because she made it sound like I was some worn-out backdrop to a life she no longer wanted to live in. Like our entire marriage had turned into this beige wallpaper she'd stopped noticing. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, okay. Then I went upstairs and lay on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling fan I hadn't dusted in months. I kept thinking about how easily she'd set the table for him, how she knew exactly where the wine opener was, how the playlist still had that old song we used to slow dance to during blizzards. She hadn't deleted me. She'd just replaced the moment. And somewhere downstairs, the man who'd taken my place was probably still in our guest bed, dreaming comfortably under our clean sheets. The next morning, I didn't ask if he was still in the house. I didn't check the guest room. I didn't listen for footsteps or drawers closing. I just brewed the coffee like always. 2 mugs. One with the cracked handle she likes because it makes it easier to grip. It was muscle memory. Even betrayal doesn't erase habits fast enough. She came down the stairs barefoot, her hair tied up like it always was when she didn't want to deal with the world. And still, her eyes didn't look at me, not really. They slid past me, like she was scanning the environment, not engaging with the person who lived in it. I placed the mug near her side of the table and sat down. The silence between us wasn't tense. It was worse than that. It was practiced. Familiar. The kind of silence you'd expect from 2 people who've trained themselves to avoid confrontation for so long, they don't know how to speak when it's necessary. You didn't sleep, she said, finally. I nodded. Didn't feel right. She stirred her coffee slowly, not drinking it. I kept staring at the table, at the wood grain, at the scratch from where I dropped a knife 2 years ago during Thanksgiving prep. I remember that day. I burned the potatoes and she laughed about it for a week. I wanted that version of her back, the one who found my clumsy chaos endearing. But that woman hadn't been in this house for a long time. Then she set the spoon down and looked directly at me for the first time since everything blew open. So what do you want from me, Lowell? A confession? Fine. The way she said it, it wasn't guilt. It wasn't remorse. It was irritation. Like I had disrupted some plan she was trying to run on autopilot. I've been seeing him for 3 months. It started after the conference in Denver. You remember, the one I said was awful? It wasn't. It was a suite, Lowell. A suite with a rooftop view and champagne already chilling in the room. He booked it before we even landed. She didn't stop. Didn't even hesitate. We had dinner. Talked about how burned out we were. About life. About pressure. About being expected to hold everything together all the time. And then we just didn't go back to our separate rooms. She paused only to take one long sip of her coffee. I wasn't looking for it, but I also didn't stop it. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. He listens to me. He sees me. He doesn't wait for me to explain things twice. And it's not just physical. I mean, yes, it is that too. But it's not only that. I feel alive when I'm around him. And with you. She didn't even finish the sentence. Just shook her head slightly, like I already knew what she meant. I could have shouted. I could have stood up and thrown the mug at the wall. But I just kept sitting, the ache in my chest spreading slowly through my limbs like concrete drying around my bones. You feel alive with him, I repeated softly. And with me, you feel what? She looked down. Obligated. That word. That single, cruel, surgical word. It lodged itself under my skin like a splinter I'd never get out. The woman who once begged me to never let her go. Who used to call me at work just to say she missed the way I made toast. Who once danced barefoot in our garage during a power outage because she thought the flashlight shadows looked romantic. She now felt obligated. Like I was a chore. A tax. A subscription she forgot to cancel. I didn't want to hurt you, she added. Too late. You could have told me, I said. And said what? Hey, I don't feel anything for you anymore, but I'm going to keep eating your casseroles until I figure out how to leave. Would that have been better? There it was again, that edge. That tone like I was the inconvenience. The weight she was trying to shake off so she could run lighter. I stood up finally. Not to fight. Not to scream. Just to move. I felt like if I stayed in that chair another minute, I'd become part of it. You could have lied better, I said. That's all I had. All I could manage. She didn't stop me. She didn't follow. She just picked up the spoon again, stirred the already mixed coffee, and went back to ignoring me like she had perfected the skill long before that morning. Upstairs, I packed a small bag. Just enough for a few days. I didn't even know where I was going. I wasn't running. I just needed space to hear myself think without hearing her voice in the background sounding so calm, so unaffected, so done. Before I walked out the door, I glanced back one more time. She wasn't at the table anymore. She was in the guest room, with the door closed. I didn't go far. That's the ridiculous part. I packed like I was going to disappear, like I'd drive off into some dramatic skyline and reinvent myself somewhere that didn't reek of betrayal and stale routines. But in the end, I wound up at a roadside motel 7 minutes from the house. I couldn't even commit to leaving properly. Just sat on a stiff bed with thin sheets, staring at my overnight bag like it should be telling me what to do next. I spent most of that first night lying still, listening to the humming AC unit and watching the light from the gas station next door flicker against the wall like some cheap lighthouse trying to guide me back to a home that didn't feel like mine anymore. I must have drafted 20 messages to her, none of which I sent. What was I going to say? Are you sorry yet? Do you miss me now that I'm gone 7 minutes away? Every time I typed something, it looked smaller on the screen than it felt in my chest. By morning, I checked my phone. Nothing from her. No missed calls. No texts. No guilt-fueled, "Where are you?" Even my silence didn't register enough to warrant a response. By the second day, I caved. I drove home just to grab a few more clothes. I didn't tell her. I half hoped she wouldn't even be there. But her car was in the driveway. The lights were on, and I could hear music playing inside when I walked up, something ambient and cold, like the soundtrack to a movie where someone gets framed for a crime they didn't commit. I opened the door and froze. She was standing in the kitchen, wearing one of my shirts. My shirts. Making tea. Not looking surprised. Not looking guilty. Just looking like she'd settled into this new reality where I was the one who had left, and she was the one picking up the rhythm without missing a beat. "You're back," she said plainly, not turning around. "I'm grabbing a few things." She nodded like I was a neighbor dropping off a borrowed ladder. I moved past her toward the stairs, not making eye contact. But halfway up, I paused. "Is he here?" A pause. Then, "No." Was he here? She exhaled like I was being exhausting again. "Not since yesterday." I stood there, hand gripping the railing like it might anchor me. "So it's a regular thing now? He just comes and goes as he pleases." Her voice floated up softly. "He doesn't come and go. He's not hiding." I turned slowly. "You mean like you were?" And that's when she said it, sharp, calm, deadly. "I'm not hiding anything, Lowell. You just don't know where to look." It hit me harder than if she had shouted. Because she was right. I hadn't known where to look. I didn't look when the late work night started. I didn't look when her phone started living face down on the table. I didn't look when her body language shifted, when hugs became polite, when kisses turned into brief contacts like she was checking a box. I thought I was being trusting, supportive, but maybe I was just being blind. I walked into the bedroom, our bedroom, and stood there for a long time. The bed was made. Pillows fluffed. It looked untouched. But there was a small detail that burned through me like acid. Her side of the nightstand was empty. No water glass. No book. No phone charger. Like she hadn't been sleeping in here at all. I opened the closet. Her clothes were still there, but scattered, rearranged. Like someone had been going through them looking for something that wasn't mine. That's when it hit me. She hadn't just replaced me emotionally. She had physically started rearranging the landscape of our life. When I came back downstairs, she was sitting on the couch, legs tucked under her, sipping her tea like she was the calm in a storm she had created. "You're welcome to stay," she said, not looking at me. "But you'll have to accept things the way they are." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my body didn't know how else to react. It was either laugh or throw something. "That's your offer?" I asked. "I get to stay in my house if I agree to pretend this isn't happening?" She finally looked up. "No, Lowell. You get to stay if you realize it was already happening long before I said anything. You just didn't want to see it." There it was. That word again. Want. Like I had chosen ignorance over pain. Like I was complicit in my own erasure. I didn't pack more clothes. I didn't even grab my charger. I just walked out the door without looking back. And this time, I didn't go to a motel. I went somewhere I thought I'd never go again. To my mother's. My mother hadn't seen me cry since I was 12 years old. That morning, when I knocked on her front door with nothing but a backpack and a heart that felt like a broken plate someone tried taping back together, I didn't plan on crying either. But when she opened the door, said nothing, and just stepped aside like she'd been expecting me for years, I couldn't stop the tears. They came suddenly, like a faucet I didn't know had been left running somewhere deep inside me. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a blanket, pointed toward the guest room, and said, "When you're ready." I lay on that small twin bed for most of the day, staring at the popcorn ceiling and trying not to remember every fight we never had. That was the thing. We didn't fight. Me and Danica? We avoided conflict like it was mold on the fruit. We just kept slicing away the spoiled bits and serving the rest with a smile. But I think now, in hindsight, that silence is its own kind of violence. The kind that suffocates slowly. The kind you don't notice until there's nowhere left at all. By the third day, Mom sat down beside me at the breakfast table and finally broke the silence. "I always liked her," she said, "but I never trusted her smile. It was too trained." I flinched at that. Not because she was wrong, but because she wasn't. Danica's smile could talk a police officer out of a ticket and convince a waiter she was allergic to parsley just so she didn't have to pick it off. But I always told myself that charm was part of her magic. Now, it just felt like a mask she'd worn so long she didn't remember what her real face looked like. I stayed with my mom for 5 nights. During that time, Danica didn't reach out once. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a, "Did you grab your medication?" Nothing. It was like I'd evaporated from her world and left behind no condensation. But on the 6th night, around 2:30 in the morning, I woke to find a missed call on my phone. And a voicemail. Her voice was calm. Unapologetic. Not drunk, but maybe dulled, like someone emotionally sedated. "Lowell, I didn't think you'd stay away this long. I thought you'd cool off and come back by now. I know this is hard, but the truth is, I don't think either of us were happy. Not really. We were just coexisting. I was suffocating. And you were fading. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, but maybe this is what we both needed. Anyway, Emerson's not staying over anymore, if that helps." I told him it was too messy. "So, call me if you want to talk." I must have listened to that message 10 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I couldn't believe how casually she had reduced our marriage to a technicality. Like our vows had expired and someone forgot to send a renewal notice. I didn't call her back. Instead, I drove back to the house the next morning, not to confront her, not even to see her. I just needed to stand in my own doorway and remember what it felt like to be a person who mattered inside those walls. But when I got there, the locks had been changed. At first, I thought maybe I was losing it. I tried the key again, slowly. Then again. Still nothing. I rang the bell. No answer. After 5 minutes of pacing, I checked the side gate. Locked too. I stood there on the front steps like a stranger. Like someone trying to sell something, instead of someone who paid that mortgage for over a decade. Eventually, the neighbor across the street, Mr. Rayburn, came outside to water his plants. He squinted toward me. "She said you were traveling," he called out. I stared back, stunned. "She said what?" He shrugged. "Said you were away for work." I figured it was one of your tech conventions again. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not exploded. Cracked. Quietly. Internally. Like an old pipe finally giving under pressure. Because I realized she wasn't just replacing me. She was rewriting me. Replacing the narrative. Telling people I was gone by choice. That I had left, as if she were the one holding things together while I gallivanted around with spreadsheets and seminars. I stood in the driveway for another half hour. Not because I thought she'd come outside, but because I needed the universe to explain how a man can live inside a life for 16 years and still end up locked out like a forgotten tenant. After the locks didn't work, and Rayburn's words kept echoing in my head, "She said you were traveling," I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I stopped playing nice. I walked around the side of the house to where the old crawlspace vent was half-rusted open behind the bushes. Years ago, when the back door locked me out, I had used it to climb through the basement and up into the kitchen. It was humiliating then, but now it felt like the only option I had left to get into my own damn house. I pulled back the vines and crouched low, feeling every inch of my 44-year-old knees protest. But I made it through, scraping my elbow in the process, breathing dust, crawling through cobwebs like some forgotten ghost returning to haunt the life that abandoned him. It was ridiculous, I know, but I needed to be inside. Not to catch her. Not even to fight. Just to feel like I still existed there. The house was quiet. Sunlight pooled gently through the blinds like nothing was wrong. A candle flickered in the hallway, vanilla and eucalyptus, the one she always lit after cooking salmon. It felt wrong. The house smelled clean. Too clean. Like it had been reset. Like she had aired out whatever fragments of me were left. I stepped lightly into the living room, looking for signs of something. But it looked untouched. Nothing out of place, no clothes on the couch, no wine glasses on the table. The dining room had fresh flowers. Our wedding photo was still on the wall, but I noticed, subtly, that the frame had been shifted behind a ceramic sculpture she hated. Almost like she hadn't taken it down, but didn't want to see it anymore either. And then, for some reason I still can't explain, I walked into the office. Our shared home office, though she had mostly taken it over in recent years. I hadn't sat at that desk in months. Not since she started working remotely and turned it into her personal command center. There was a new ergonomic chair. 2 monitors. A glass of water, still half full, like she'd just stepped out. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe a journal. Maybe her phone, left unlocked. Maybe something that told me I hadn't imagined the distance, the way she withdrew piece by piece over the past year. But what I found was worse. On the desktop, there was a folder labeled simply Q4 Media Plan. Nothing suspicious, just corporate language. But inside, there were subfolders. One marked Denver_recap. That's where the affair had started, according to her voicemail. I clicked, my heart pounding like I was opening a forbidden drawer. Photos. Dozens of them. Not scandalous, but damning. Her and Emerson. Together at the rooftop bar. Laughing over room service. Her in a white robe, holding a champagne flute, barefoot on a balcony. Him taking selfies with her head on his shoulder. They didn't look like people having a one-time slip. They looked like a couple. I kept scrolling until I hit a video file, no thumbnail, just a date and time. I almost didn't click it. But curiosity has a way of tying your hands. The video was short. 30 seconds. Just her voice. So if he ever finds out, I'll just say we were brainstorming campaigns. He believes anything I tell him. Anyway. He's always so eager to play the good guy. And then a laugh, not from her. His laugh. Emerson's. Confident. Deep. Comfortable. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing until the clip ended. I stared at the screen, frozen. The room felt like it was tipping sideways. She hadn't just cheated. She had planned her story. Rehearsed the version I'd be allowed to hear. They had laughed about it. About me. I didn't cry. That would have been a release. Instead, I felt cold, a kind of stillness that comes after the fire burns through everything and there's just smoke left. I copied the folder to my thumb drive. I didn't take anything else. Didn't leave a note. Didn't slam the door. I just crawled back out the same way I came in, like a burglar stealing evidence from a life I used to call mine. The next day, I got a text. From her. Only 4 words. You weren't supposed to. No greeting. No explanation. No apology. Just that. And somehow, that told me everything. I stared at her text, you weren't supposed to, for a long time, trying to decide what emotion it was meant to trigger. Guilt? Fear? Embarrassment? She wasn't denying anything. She wasn't even angry. Just disappointed that I had seen the truth without her permission. As if betrayal didn't count unless I caught it the wrong way. As if the real crime wasn't the affair, but that I broke the unspoken rule of playing dumb. For hours, I said nothing. I paced my mom's hallway like a man trying to wear down the floorboards into answers. Finally, I sent her one text. You're not who I thought you were. Her reply came instantly. That's because you never looked close enough. And just like that, the narrative flipped again. She'd turned my trust into a flaw, my patience into a weakness. I should have been furious, but all I felt was hollow. Like I'd been standing in a house made of paper, admiring the wallpaper, while the matchbox sat burning underneath the floor. I didn't respond. I didn't sleep. But I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I reached out to someone else. Not a therapist. Not a friend. I called her sister. Her younger sister, Noelle, had always been blunt, sharp enough to draw blood without raising her voice. We'd never been especially close, but she'd seen Danica without the curated image, the practiced charm. She knew things I didn't. I kept the call short. I asked her if she knew. There was a long pause. Then she asked me to meet. We met at a diner 2 towns over, early enough that the place was still half dark, and the waitress looked like she hadn't had her coffee yet. Noelle was already there, black hoodie, arms crossed, tapping her nails on the mug like a metronome. You really thought you were the only one she lied to, she said before I even sat down. I blinked. What does that mean? She leaned in. She's been doing this for years, Lowell. Different names. Different stories. You think Emerson was the first? He was just the one that stuck long enough to make it real. My throat tightened. You're saying she's... I'm saying she's mastered the art of keeping people exactly where she needs them. You were the safe zone. The fallback plan. The in case everything else collapses option. I swallowed hard, hands clenched in my lap. Noelle wasn't gloating. She looked tired. Like this conversation had been waiting in her mouth for years, and now that it was out, it only hurt more. She told me once, she said, voice lower now, that she envied women who married boring men. That they were easy to manage. That they don't ask too many questions. My face must have said everything. She was talking about you, Lowell. The words sat between us like broken glass. I asked Noelle why she was telling me all this now. Why not earlier? She looked down, then shrugged. Because I thought she'd stop. I thought maybe she actually loved you. But when she started saying she might sell the house without telling you, I realized she was never going to stop. Not unless someone put it all on the table. I stared at her, stunned. Sell the house. She has a realtor lined up. She didn't mention that. No, she hadn't. Because why would she? I was no longer part of the conversation. Just an obstacle to be worked around. A name on a deed she thought she could erase. I left the diner in a daze. My name, my actual name, was still on everything. The mortgage. The bank accounts. The insurance. And now she was making plans as if I had never existed. That night, back at my mom's place, I booted up the old family laptop and pulled open the shared email account Danica and I use for bills. She hadn't logged out. I scrolled through flagged messages. One thread caught my eye from a real estate agent named Catherine H. Danica, I've reviewed the comps and think we can list higher than expected. Still haven't received co-owner's signature. Need that before we move forward. The message was dated 2 days ago. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining it. She was literally preparing to sell the house without even telling me. I sat back in the chair, numb. My ears were ringing. I stared at that email like it was a death certificate not of a house, but of a whole life. Our life. The one I'd watered and maintained, and paid for, and protected. Now being traded away like a piece of old furniture she no longer wanted in the background of her new love story. I didn't respond to Danica's last text. Instead, I sent an email to the realtor. Only 2 words. See me. The realtor met me the next morning at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She was younger than I expected, sharply dressed, with a polite but guarded expression, like she already knew this meeting would be messy. She slid into the booth across from me and opened her laptop before even saying hello. I assumed you were on board, she said, not looking up. She made it sound like this was just a formality. She made a lot of things sound like that, I replied. That got her attention. I leaned forward, calm but clear. I'm not here to fight. I just want to make sure I'm not erased from something I literally built with my hands. I painted that house. I laid those floorboards. I fixed that roof after that storm. She doesn't get to sweep me out like a spider in the corner. The realtor's face softened. She closed the laptop. She said you'd been away for work. That you signed over your interest already. I didn't, I said flatly. She nodded slowly. Then she's not selling anything. Not without your signature. And, from the way you're talking, I'm guessing you're not going to give it. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took out the USB drive from my jacket, the one with the folder Danica never meant me to find, and slid it across the table. I'm not trying to ruin her life, I said. But I'm not going to let her erase mine either. The realtor didn't touch it. She didn't have to. The message was clear. I'll mark the file inactive, she said quietly. You won't hear from me again. I walked out of that coffee shop with my head low, but my shoulders square. I still had nothing. No home, no marriage, no peace. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I'd stopped bleeding. Like the wound had clotted just enough to let me breathe again. And then, the unexpected happened. I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter. Handwritten. Postmarked from Danica, but sent from her parents' address. Inside was 1 page. Neat cursive. No greeting. No farewell. You were the only person who ever gave me the space to be myself, and I used that space to disappear. I blamed you for the emptiness I created. I told myself you were dull because I couldn't stand how small I felt next to your kindness. Emerson is gone. He left a week ago. I told him I was ready for something real, and he vanished. I guess we were both pretending. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know the silence wasn't because I stopped caring. It was because I didn't know how to face someone I didn't deserve. That should have made me angry, but it didn't. It just made me sad and a little free. I didn't write her back. What would I say? That I still thought about our road trips and our burnt French toast Sundays? That I sometimes reached for her in my sleep, out of habit more than hope? No. Instead, I got a storage unit. I cleared out the rest of my stuff. I hired a lawyer, not for revenge, but to draw the final lines cleanly, with dignity. I declined alimony. I didn't want her money. I just wanted my peace. And slowly, piece by piece, I started building a life again. At first it was small. New apartment. New routines. A plant I kept alive longer than 3 weeks. Then it was bigger. I started going to these weekend walks organized by the local library. Random people. Fresh air. Nobody asking, "Where's Danica?" And one Saturday morning, I met a woman named Elise. She was quiet, soft-spoken, taught middle school art, and didn't ask me what had broken me, only what I wanted to build next. And for once, I didn't stumble through the answer. I just smiled and said, "Something real. We're not rushing anything. We're just walking, week by week, park by park." But I've learned something important. Sometimes the life you lose isn't the tragedy. Sometimes it's the one you clung to for too long. And sometimes it takes being left behind to finally catch up with yourself.